Back on the record, 21 CR 5052, State of Ohio versus Michael Jason Meade. Do we need to put anything on the record prior to bringing in the jury?
Not on behalf of Mr. Meade, Your Honor.
All right, let's go get the jury.
All rise.
Everyone can have a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, I was looking around the gallery and I noticed a bunch of people wearing pink clothing. So I forgot to wish you a happy Valentine's Day to everyone. Any closing argument on behalf of the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Okay.
Thank you. May it please the court, Madam Court Reporter, Mr. Nolan, Jason, Ms. Stevens, prosecution team. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Good morning.
First and foremost, I want to thank you. I want to thank you because you started this process by raising your right hand and taking an oath. And that oath was that you wouldn't draw any conclusions or make any assumptions or talk about the case or deal with the case until you go to deliberations. I've been busy, but I've tried to watch, and I do believe you've kept that oath, and I thank you for that, because without you keeping that oath, and without you participating in our civic duty, we wouldn't have the best criminal justice system in the world. So once again, I thank you. December 4th, 2020, ladies and gentlemen. It's a tragic day. It's a sad day. It's a tragedy that affects this courtroom, ladies and gentlemen. It affects this side of the courtroom. It affects this side of the courtroom. Somebody lost a son and a grandson, a brother, a friend on December 4th, 2020. Somebody has to deal with the sanctity of life and the preserving life versus the occupation. And December 4th, 2020, ladies and gentlemen, also will affect you if it hasn't already. You'll take a piece of that with you for the rest of your life. Everyone in this courtroom is going to take that with them and say, geez, December 4th, 2020 in the future. Okay? And own that because you're human beings. It affects people differently. The judge told you in the beginning we have a job to do. The different jobs associated with us. Your job's just getting ready to get started, the hard So in order to do that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go over our case and our witnesses' credibility versus the government's case and the government's witnesses' credibility. And I'm going to draw the distinctions. I'm going to point out the consistency and cooperation, ladies and gentlemen, with our case and with Jason Meade. So let's start right there, okay, with Jason Meade. Tour in Iraq for Lima Company after 9/11. Honorable discharge. A pastor, an employee of a government in law enforcement for 17 years. Now, let's compare what Jason Meade perceived that day versus Jason Meade's statement that he gave 2 weeks after the December 4th, 2020, without seeing videotapes, without seeing body cams, without seeing anything, because he gave his side of what he remembers. And let's compare that to the physical evidence, and let's compare that and see where there's corroboration and there's consistency. Remember in voir dire, we talked about credibility. Credibility. I talked to you about it, I said, yeah, if something's corroborated, if something's consistent, that makes it credible. Well, ladies and gentlemen, credibility and corroboration is not a coincidence. It just doesn't happen by luck. So let's go over the points that Jason Meade put out in his statement that have been corroborated and confirmed and occurred. First one, geez, I'm at the intersection, okay? And that's what this case is about, ladies and gentlemen. The interaction between my client and Mr. Goodson, from the interaction to the door. All the other stuff are distractions, ladies and gentlemen. So what does he tell you he sees at the intersection? I'm at the light, okay? I see a car coming. I see a person waving a gun. I see this. So what does he do, okay? So the issue is, do you believe more likely than not that my client saw a gun at that intersection at Carl and Ferris, okay? So how is that corroborated? Well, geez, he describes it in his statement, ladies and gentlemen, as an extended mag. I could see an extended magazine. Someone who's trained on arms, someone who's trained on those types of things, and they're trained, ladies and gentlemen, to look for the unexpected. They're leaving. They're clearing the scene. He's trained. He sees a guy waving a gun. That's not normal. Doesn't matter what time and everything. That's not normal. He watches that. So how is that confirmed, ladies and gentlemen, with physical evidence? There's a gun found at the scene, ladies and gentlemen. It's there, out on the body. The government confirmed it for us because they put the Casey gun owned, and certified it and authenticated that, in fact, it was an extended magazine gun. Corroborated? Yes. Consistent? Yes. What does Jason Meade tell you, and in his statement, about what does he do when he sees it? He airs immediately to his team. He communicates with the only device he has with his walkie-talkie and tells them, I got a guy waving a gun, okay? He immediately does that. Now, is this corroborated and confirmed? Who? Yes, Deputy David Youngless. I'm at the Wendy's. I hear the call, guy with a gun. He says, Jay, is it our guy? No, it's not. Why? Because Jason Meade had dealings with Mr. Barber before. Okay? So, guy with a gun waving. Where are you? He gives a site. And we know that happened, ladies and gentlemen. We know that it happened because they all respond. So, when Jason Meade puts in a statement that I aired over the walkie-talkie, a guy with a gun, right there, that defeats any indication that Mr. Merkel would say somehow that this was a cover-up. Because if it's a cover-up, then he must have started it at the intersection. That's how preposterous their case is. That's how desperate they are. That they would term that when he walks out to the light that it's a cover-up. Well, geez, let me think. I'm going to do this in the next 3 or 4 minutes, so I'm going to pretend to air that I saw someone waving a gun. Come on. And it's confirmed by Deputy Youngless. Jason Meade in his statement, the purpose of the statement is to say, this is what happened, this is what I saw. And you heard Art Hughes, his purpose is to poke holes in that statement. in the statement, he says, when I saw the person at the end of the street, he had a gun in one hand and a bag in the other. Again, somehow Jason Meade is clairvoyant and knows. Now, again, how do we prove that? The government proved it for us with a picture of the bag. Jason Meade doesn't see any discovery. He has no evidence or anything like that when he writes this out. But he says, 2 weeks after, I saw a bag in one hand and that in the other. But the cover-up started at the intersection. He says in his statement, ladies and gentlemen, that I did a U-turn. Is that confirmed? Yes, by the video. Does Jason Meade know when he writes a statement that there's a video? No, nobody does. He does a U-turn to pursue it. Do you think someone who's done a tour in Afghanistan for 7 months for the Lima Company is going to make up the fact that, oh, geez, yeah, I did a U-turn? No. How's it confirmed? Rosser confirms it. I'm sitting behind Jay. I see him turn. I think, oh, geez, he left something back at the scene. Happens sometimes. All right? But it's confirmed by a video and by Ryan Rosser. The U-turn. Next. In his statement, he says, I stop and talk to Ryan Rosser. I stop quickly and talk to Ryan Rosser. He tells you that on the stand. How's that confirmed, ladies and gentlemen? By the video. You see him pause. Even Mr. Cornish, they said, oh, that's where he paused. And he says, guy with a gun. He communicates. He's got to go. He thinks Rosser, Jason tells you, he thinks Rosser hears this because he aired it over the Marshal's channel. Ryan took his communication off. Okay, is that reasonable? Yeah. Does that make sense? Is it confirmation that he stopped and told something to Ryan Rosser? Yes. The video shows that, and Ryan Rosser. Confirmation. He tells in a statement, I point to the guy and say, there's the guy with the gun. Who confirms that? Ryan Rosser. Ryan Rosser says, yes, as I pulled up, get my stuff on, Jay, go, there's the guy with the gun. I look down. The guy looks at me. That's confirmed, ladies and gentlemen, and that's consistent. Consistency is not a coincidence. Collaboration is not a coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. Next, he yells. He says in a statement, I issue commands. I yell, drop the gun, show me your hands. U.S. Marshal, I yell multiple things, multiple times. How was that corroborated? 2 ways. Sheila Staniford. So somehow Sheila Staniford hears commands. Show me your hands, show me your hands. 3 times she says. And then she says, I heard shots. Mr. Merkel was, well, you heard the shots first, then the commands, right? She's like, no. Why would I lie? She heard commands and did that. And he has the audacity to get up here and say this was a cover-up? That, gee, somehow I'm going to pretend that there's a gun up at the scene. I'm going to pretend this. I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to pretend that I yell commands, but yet Sheila Staniford hears the commands. That's how desperate they are. Who else hears the commands? Ryan Rosser. He hears them as he's pulling up in the car, and he hears them. Can't tell exactly. He hears the commands. Then he hears the shots. Corroboration, confirmation. Let's go to another topic with regards to credibility, ladies and gentlemen. Credibility, okay? Remember Sergeant Stanley testified at the scene. There was an issue. He's like, hey, talks with the other detectives. We got an issue. We got a magazine that holds 30 on Jason's rifle. We only have six shell casings. Hey, have we missed another shell case, or what have we done? Well, let's ask Jason. Jason, how many do you start with? He says 29. That's a mathematical certainty. If there's 23 left in the magazine, and you start with 29, and guess what? There's 6 shell casings found. And he tells you what, and the people who testified with the weapon, if you pull that trigger on fully auto, you have no idea how many bullets come out. No idea how many bullets come out. One pull, it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 5, it could be 10. It depends how long. So again, mathematical certainty, 1 + 1 = 2. There is no doubt. And again, you know he's telling the truth because he doesn't know what they're talking about. They ask him a question, hey, how many do you normally start in your magazine? He said 29. There's 23 left, and oh geez, this whole cover-up, there's 6 shell casings left, this whole cover-up. It's a mathematical certainty. Where else is he corroborated? By the physical evidence that doesn't lie. That's physical evidence. 23 bullets left, started with 29, there's 6 shell casings. What else is physical evidence? He tells you in his statement, and he tells you when he testifies where he was approximately when he had to fire his weapon. When the gun came back towards him, not turned all the way around like Mr. Coles, when the gun came back towards him, and there's an imminent threat facing him, an immediate threat facing him, he moves to the left, goes and fires, okay? So he tells you where he is, right? And he tells that in his statement. Geez, where are all the shell casings in those pictures, ladies and gentlemen? They're all to the right. Who confirms that every single person who testified about ejection, they go to the right, ladies and gentlemen? They go to the right. Physical evidence confirming and corroborating my client's statement from 2 weeks after. No access to any of this stuff. None. You heard Detective Hughes say no. Consistent with physical evidence. The government helps us and proves one on our own that we didn't even have to worry about. And that's when Mr. Schroyer started his cross-examination of my client, saying, you said that a northbound car came through, right? In your statement. My client says yes. Hasn't seen the video, shows it. Mr. Schroyer goes, well, where's the northbound car? Jason goes, it just went by. A northbound car went by before Casey Goodson's car turned in there. Yes. Well, you can't see that on the video. They back up the video, and you guys see the northbound car goes, and Casey Goodson goes. They proved that for us, and that was in Jason Meade's statement. How many times do you think the 3 of these people have watched that video? How many times do you think they've gone back and forth? They've clipped it, they've cropped it, they've done it. They put their little circles on it, and Mr. Schroyer was even wrong about that. But yet Mr. Merkel stands up here and says, because Jason Meade said, I was wrong about when the car actually stopped in front of me versus it slowed down and continuous turn. I was wrong about that. Is it reasonable? They've had the video for 2-3 years, and he misses that. My client says, yeah, well, I asked him, why do you think you're mistaken? Well, I was focused on the gun. That's why he flinched when he went like this, when he turned to the side. I was focused on the gun. That's their big Perry Mason moment, ladies and gentlemen, that in a 10-page statement, that's the only inconsistency or only thing that's not exact to the video, exact to the physical evidence, from the time of the interaction at the scene until the doorway. Northbound. Jason didn't have the advantage of watching the video over and over, ladies and gentlemen, when he gave his statement. He didn't have that advantage. Mr. Merkel talks about the credibility of Mrs. Payne. No, absolutely. Mrs. Payne is credible, Sharon Payne. She's even so credible, ladies and gentlemen, that they asked her a question about, well, when he rides, you ride with him in the car, yes. Yeah. Does he have the gun? Yeah, he usually always has the gun with him. Well, it's uncomfortable for him when he keeps it in his holster, so he brings it out. Then they ask, well, does he ever point it? No, he'd never point it. But she tells you, she's honest about, yeah, it's uncomfortable. That's why he doesn't ride with it. And then what do we have to do because they asked that type of question? Mr. Nolder has to get up here and show a picture of her grandson to someone who just testified, who they just played the 911 call to you, okay? And he has to say, who's this in the picture? That's Casey. Where is he? He's in a car. What's he doing? He has a gun. What's he doing with that gun? He's pointing it. That exhibit will be back there for you. That exhibit. So that's what they do, ladies and gentlemen. Do we think Miss Payne's not credible? No, we know she is. Because she's the one that tells you it's uncomfortable. He doesn't use it. He doesn't keep his gun in his holster in the car because it's uncomfortable. Want to have it both ways, ladies and gentlemen. They want to play on your emotions and play a 911 tape about what occurred after, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing during the intersection until the use of force was done. Nothing. Their whole closing, ladies and gentlemen, was about what was before and what was after. That's not the analysis of this case, ladies and gentlemen. How do we know that Jason's telling the truth? How do we know that he's credible? He was asked, did you put your siren on? No. He was asked, did you put your lights on? I don't know. I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, someone who is lying tells you, I'm 99% sure I turned my lights on. We asked them, when you were at the scene, did you turn your lights when you were pursued? They asked them, did you turn your lights on when you were pursuing Casey Goodson? I don't know. Did you turn your siren on? No, I know I didn't turn my siren on. A lie, ladies and gentlemen, is, yeah, I'm 99% sure I turned my lights on. Oh, yeah, I definitely turned my lights on. Yeah. And then you're shown that your lights weren't on. That's a lie. But when you say, I don't know, that's being honest. Watch the video, the full video, not the cropped one, the full video when Jason Meade goes towards the intersection. You'll see that it's 8 to 10 seconds, depending on how you count. Close your eyes when you go back in the jury room. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000, 6, 1,000, 7, 1,000, 8, 1,000. Open your eyes and imagine what you see to the left, to the center, to the right in an intersection at Carl and Ferris. Okay, 8 to 10 seconds. Then write down what you saw without revealing anything. Okay? Everyone will have something a bit incorrect, but the basics will be there. The vantage point of my client was there for 8 to 10 seconds, observing Mr. Goodson's car, his attention directed to it, observing him go here, observing it going like this. Once again, they had it for 3 years and they get it wrong about what happens in the video, ladies and gentlemen. The cross-examination of my client was, geez, another Perry Mason moment. Geez, you said today, Mr. Meade, that Casey Goodson was running from you when he was at the car and went to the house. He was running back to the side house. Yeah, I said running. But in your statement, you used moving quickly. There you go, moving quickly versus running. Then they go over and over with Ryan Rosser with regards to him describing how he was eluding or fleeing. Each of them saw what they saw and described, okay? But the issue is, the concept is, ladies and gentlemen, are they confirmed and corroborated that the guy was eluding them, evading them? There's the guy with the gun. Rosser says, he looks at me, and then he bolts, he flees. So does Jason Meade. Running versus moving quickly. Based on their training, ladies and gentlemen, every witness said this, if someone sees you and knows you're there and they leave, they're evading you. They're trying to elude you. Every police officer said that, ladies and gentlemen, because they're trained to look for that. This case isn't about whether he took his first step. Okay, when they asked Mr. Rosser, how did he take that first step? Did he run? It's a progression, ladies and gentlemen. We just went over, ladies and gentlemen, from the intersection to there, everything that was confirmed and corroborated on behalf of my client's testimony and statement. And yes, by the physical evidence. Now, let's go over talking about someone, Mr. Meade was consistent and credible and corroborated. Outside corroboration, not just himself. All right, now who in this trial could provide you with no corroboration? Who in this trial can give you neither consistency or confirmation? Who in this trial, geez, Mr. Korn, AKA Facebook poster, AKA the deleter, AKA I'm second place with 116 points on following Tamala Payne's we're friends on Facebook. That person. Let's look at him, ladies and gentlemen, and see what corroborates his testimony, if it's consistent with the physical evidence, as Mr. Merkel says. Well, he was unique because you got an instruction before he testified. That doesn't normally happen. There's a separation of witnesses. You got an instruction because he's watched the trial. He's watched Sheila Stedenberg. He's watched our client. He's watched the news. He's watched everything. It would be like taking someone in the back of the courtroom and plucking them in and say, hey, what'd you see that day? That's how desperate they are. That's their witness. They put that type of evidence on. Let's look at just his vantage point. Let's take it there. Forget the other stuff for a second. Let's just take his vantage point, okay? As he pulls up, he's in position 2. He's behind Jason Meade. Now, initially, he tells Mr. Merkel on February the 7th, oh, yeah, I saw Casey Goodson's car. How about he use his name, Casey? I saw Casey Goodson's car on Carl. He doesn't tell that to the FBI. And he doesn't tell that to you. Mr. Nolder brought that up. Not them, Mr. Nolder. Then what happens is, he's... Now, when you watch the video, use your common sense. Don't leave it in here. Take it back with you. You'll see that his car never actually stops. He kind of rolls, okay? I submit to you, using your common sense, that we have all approached the intersection rolling, and at some point, ladies and gentlemen, your attention's got to be on the car in front of you, so you don't hit it. You got to come to some type of almost stop. So I think it's reasonable to believe that you have to look at the car in front of you, right? Then look at his vantage point. Look at his vantage point, okay? And use the counter, okay? And again, your memory will be better than mine back there when you go, but use the counter. When I use the counter, from the time Casey Goodson's car turned on the front of my client's car, 1,1002. Close your eyes. 1,1002. Imagine how fast that is. Look at the video. That's the vantage point. And that's the time that Chris Korn had to see in this situation. But it doesn't really matter, ladies and gentlemen, because he's watched everything else. He's watched everything. He told you he heard about the AirPods. So why would he say that he was dancing and stuff, Mr. Merkel wants to say? Because he heard that. He heard about the music. He saw it on the trial. Look at the 2 seconds. Now, the FBI shows him the video. Mr. Merkel, Mr. Short, and Mr. Straw interview him the day before. They don't show him the video, but the FBI does. Let's just listen to what he says in that video, or that audio tape, I'm sorry, in his tape recorded statement with the FBI. Well, put yourself in his shoes, ladies and gentlemen. We have that a lot. Put yourself in his shoes. The FBI is coming to interview you. Feel nervous? Geez, not every day you're interviewed by the FBI, right? What's he tell the FBI? Well, the guy made a wide turn. Okay. Look on that video. Show me where the wide turn is, ladies and gentlemen. Now they're going to talk about a brick wall. They're going to talk. No. You can see the car turn. There's no wide turn. What else does he say? Oh, geez, he almost hit me. You can't have it both ways. Either he makes a wide turn or he almost hits you. Because a wide turn, you're not going to hit him. And again, 1,1002. This is what he's saying. Okay, this is the time frame. Now, the best one is when he tells the FBI, they ask him, well, how'd you know that these guys were law enforcement? He goes, well, because they had their lights on. He had his lights on. That's a problem at the intersection, because he doesn't. And they ask him, are you sure? He goes, I'm 99% sure that he had his lights on, because that's how I knew. Blue light, this light. Now, after meeting with the prosecutors, he changes that a little bit on the stand. Well, it was a brake light. No. He tells the FBI he's 99% sure that the only way I knew they were law enforcement is because Jason Meade had his lights on. The ones above, the ones on the side, and stuff like this. He even talks about that in the interview. Well, are you sure? Then they show him the video. No lights on. And he goes, well, maybe during the U-turn. No. That's their cooperation. That's their witness. He must have only seen the part of the trial where Mr. Merkel showed multiple times of Jason putting lights on at the end. at the end of the thing, after medics are there, and everything like that. So, of course, is it, yeah, his lights are on. That's why he says it, ladies and gentlemen. He's told about the pains and perjury of talking to the FBI, and you need to be truthful. And the very last question is there anything else that you think is important? Anything else that you think? Do you have any contact with a family? Anything else important? Chris Korn says, nope. Nope. He doesn't tell him that he posts directly instant messages to Malapane 4 times. He doesn't tell him that he comments, likes, loves, things of that nature. Thumbs up, caring emojis. He doesn't tell the FBI that. He doesn't tell the FBI that he's at 116 points. He's almost a top point getter for 1 week. This is the week of January 28th. That's 3 days before this trial even ever started with evidence. Opening statements were on January 31st, ladies and gentlemen. He's posting and responding to their site on January 28th, 29th, the 30th. He keeps posting the 31st, the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd. He's ahead of one of the other Payne family members. He's in 2nd place at 116. Now, I don't think I need to say that to the federal government. But that's reasonable, Mr. Merkel says. That's reasonable that he didn't tell them that. That's not doing the right thing, ladies and gentlemen. That's not doing the right thing. Instead, what does he do, ladies and gentlemen? They interview him on the 7th, the prosecutions. He's interviewed by the FBI on the 8th, and what does he do on the 9th, he tells you? Yeah, I'm going to delete everything. I'm going to delete everything. That's doing the right thing. People don't delete things who are transparent. You don't delete something unless it's a problem. You don't delete something unless you're making it up. You don't delete that. You don't delete stuff if you want to be the 15-minute fame. You don't. But now we know why he deleted it, ladies and gentlemen. And again, this is their witness, contradicting himself. He tells Mr. Noller, well, I guess I shouldn't have done that. Really? Do the right thing. Really? Let's also look what he says. Now, this gets into the details, okay? Let's take his statement apart. His statement to the 3 prosecutors and his statement to the FBI. Number 1, they said, well, can you describe him? Describe what he looked like. Well, first he says it's a female. And he says, oh, split second. Keep track of the split seconds. Then he says, yes, the person had an afro. You know that Mr. Merkel just showed you that he had a do-rag on. You know from the pictures that he had a hood on. You know that a do-rag can't show an afro. 0 for 1 he is. That's in the first interview. In the second interview, the FBI asked him, well, describe him to us. Well, he had a ponytail. Didn't have a ponytail. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Korn can't even corroborate himself. He can't even be consistent himself from one day to the next because it's not true. First it's an afro, then it's a ponytail. And you guys know from the evidence he had a do-rag on. You can't see that. But Chris Korn needs you to believe that. He's got to add those things in there, ladies and gentlemen, because he's doing the right thing. They know. They know. Now, did they ask him about social media? No. Did the FBI ask him about social media? No. We did. And he knows coming to the deposition on Monday at our office that he's already deleted this stuff. He knows. They're there. They know how biased he is, but they still put him on, ladies and gentlemen, because their case is terrible. Desperate. He says 99% 3 times in the interviews. The first time is with the lights. The second time is I'm 99% sure that I came back out of states. Oh, really? Tells that to Mr. Merkel, tells that to the FBI. The FBI then shows him, and guess what? He's wrong again. So far he's used 99% 2 times, and he's been wrong about both of them. So even 99%. Likes, cares, emojis. Now, what was really striking, ladies and gentlemen, was on the cross-examination with Mr. Nolder, okay, this is using your common sense and the credibility of a witness, that an instruction was given to you, is he says, man, yeah, when I was out there, I was at the park down on Estates for about 10 minutes, give or take some. And he goes, then I looked and I saw this person who scared or spooked me. I saw this person who scared or spooked me. Ladies and gentlemen, we've all been in that situation where you get scared or startled or you get spooked by something. And what do? You then look at it. You then describe it. You then go, oh, geez, that's elated. Mr. Nolder asked him, can you tell me what she looked like? No. Can you tell me what she had on? No. Can you tell me where she was in the house? No. Can you tell me where the car is? No. He can give you no details about that. Now, but the government wants you to believe that, oh, he was dancing and singing and stuff like this, and could see all that stuff in 1002 with this. What else does he say? Well, geez, there was one hand on the wheel. No, there was no hands on the wheel. There were both hands on the wheel. One hand here. Multiple. But he can give you nothing about the person who scared him, and he was looking at them, and he realized, yeah, that she's taping me. And he's looking directly at them. Zero information. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason we asked him about the post on December 18th of 2020, this is 2 weeks after the incident, 2 weeks. The reason we asked him about that is because it's important. And the reason we asked him about that, ladies and gentlemen, in Mr. Nolder's last question, ladies and gentlemen, his last question to him, tell me what, in verbatim, what the post read. Okay? I said I was there. I was behind Jason Meade, and I saw the victim come by, and I said I followed down the street. I didn't see anything. That's what he posted on December 18th of 2020. That's what he posted. And he deleted that because he's trying to deceive you, and he's trying to hide stuff. And they put him on. And they know it. And Mr. Merkel says that, I think he acted reasonably. Well, if he acted reasonably, ladies and gentlemen, then we've proven more likely than not, we've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jason Meade acted reasonably. Mr. Merkel gets up here and says, I think he acted reasonably. Very important, ladies and gentlemen. Are you going to rely upon the word of Christopher Korn for a surgery for a child or care for an elderly parent? Because that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt, ladies and gentlemen. Is that the type of evidence you're going to rely upon that's not corroborated, inconsistent, made up? He can't even get it straight after watching the trial, ladies and gentlemen. Is that what you're going to rely upon in the most important of your fellows? Very important in this case, ladies and gentlemen, what's in the jury instructions versus what's not in the jury instructions. So let's change gear with that. What's in the jury instructions, ladies and gentlemen, that you have and you'll read is you only are to judge Casey Goodson's conduct perceived by my client from the time of the intersection to the shooting. That's conduct. There will be no whys in there, ladies and gentlemen. There will be, why did Casey do this? Why didn't he abide by the commands? Why didn't he stop after the commands? Why didn't he do something? And Mr. Merkel knows that. He just got up here and told you the whys of the case, like in voir dire. This isn't about why somebody did something. This is about actions perceived, things that are looked at in my client's shoes. They talk about in their opening the whys and stuff like that. There is nothing in the whys, ladies and gentlemen. It's all a distraction, ladies and gentlemen. Everything that he talked about in his closing was before. The dentist, the subway, the commercial driver's license. None of that is known to Jason Meade. This case is analyzed on what Jason Meade saw at that intersection there to the house. It's all distraction because that's all they have, ladies and gentlemen. There's no reasons why a person flees. It's if you see the act of evading. We talked in voir dire about no shoulda, coulda, woulda. I counted 6 times, ladies and gentlemen, that Mr. Merkel said the reasonable officer should have done or could have done in his closing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the actual jury instruction, you'll have it back there on page 8, says the relevant legal consideration is not what the defendant officer should have known or should have done, but whether the reasonable police officer placed in his shoes could have believed about the situational need to use deadly force. Could have believed. And they still keep doing it. The experts both agreed you can't do shoulda, coulda, woulda. We talked about that in voir dire. And they keep doing it, even in their closing. Kevin Davis puts you inside of Jason Meade's shoes. Jason Meade puts you inside of his shoes in his testimony, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing in the jury instructions will say you're to do it from Casey Goodson's perspective. What was his intent? What was this? What was this? And that's all their closing argument was. Oh, geez, 6 shots. How could safety on how could you? No. That's not the legal consideration. The judge told you in there you can't use hindsight. That's all Mr. Schroyer did with Jason Meade's cross. You didn't tell Ryan Rosser to put a siren on, right? You didn't tell Ryan Rosser to get on the loudspeaker. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. You didn't wait to verify a plate, did you? No, there's no leads in his car, and verifying the plate, it would come back to a female, not a male who's driving it, who's parked the wrong way, who runs to not to the front of the house, but the side of the house. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. That's their whole cross, ladies and gentlemen. What you also won't find in the jury instructions, ladies and gentlemen, most importantly, that their expert opined on forever, are tactics. You won't find anything in there about tactics, ladies and gentlemen. The word tactic will not appear. You know what else won't appear? Reasonably accepted police practices. Because the judge gives you the law here. You have the law. You have the law on justification and the calculus of reasonableness. You know what's not in the jury instructions, ladies and gentlemen, is what Jason Meade did not say. Did not say. Remember when Mr. Schroyer got up here in opening and he said, silence is powerful. Silence is powerful. And they try to deceive you with the last clip. Mr. Meade's answer, ladies and gentlemen, but for us, we played the whole tape. They played a clip. The question that was asked, that was brought out from the Minerva Park officer, the question that was asked on his body camera was, what was the call? How did I miss the call? That's the question Jason's trying to answer to Officer Phillips. They don't bring in Officer Phillips. That's the question that was trying to answer. We exposed that. We shed light on that. The question that was asked is, how did I miss the call? What was the call? The call was continuously, and he told you, he radioed it at the intersection, a guy with a gun, he radioed it as he was going down States. That's what the call was. Guy with a gun, waving a gun, pointing a gun. Not, the question wasn't, why did you fire your weapon? That's not the question. But that's how desperate they are, ladies and gentlemen, that they have to just give you a clip and say, here's what Jason Meade's answer was, and they don't even give you the question. Mr. Merkel talked about playing fair in voir dire. Playing fair. Playing fair, ladies and gentlemen, is when a coroner who's a forensic pathologist, who's certified, who testified, it is impossible to say which shot was first. Impossible. He gets up here and contradicts with some theory that he believes the first 3 shots were these. It's impossible, the coroner said. But they just keep going. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Meade told you once he found out that the person who was placed in the situation, who put the gun back towards him, who he shot, was someone's nephew in the house. He told you how that made him feel. He told you that people react differently, ladies and gentlemen, when they're in use of force. Some people throw up afterwards. Some people get mad. Some people don't. Some people get angry, aggressive. Some people get nervous. Everybody reacts differently. But he told you because he just learned that it was someone's nephew in the house, He thought about his family and potentially loss of his family. And that he just had to shoot someone. And he has to tell his son on his birthday that I was placed in a situation where I had to make a split-second decision. And how's that going to affect my son? Not, geez, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And especially on my son's birthday. No. But that's how they twist it. What definitely is in the jury instructions, and you heard it already, is the testimony of one witness, if believed by you, is sufficient to prove, ladies and gentlemen, any disputed fact. Testimony of you, okay? Mr. Merkel's right. There's only one person who saw the gun came back, and that was my client, okay? But that happens in our society, all right? Under their theory, one of us was walking down an alley, and we got robbed, and there was no cameras, no anybody there to see it getting robbed, but I pick out the person, and I say to the police, that's the person. That wouldn't be good enough for them, because there's no other witness to the robbery. One witness, if believed by you, ladies and gentlemen, did the gun come back. He's the only witness that was there in that vicinity when the gun came back. Yes. But that doesn't make it any less credible, ladies and gentlemen. That's why that jury instruction's in there. Ladies and gentlemen, our case was consistent and was corroborated in every aspect. The fairy tale that they want to tell you about where the gun was, that there was no gun at the intersection, there was no gun, that type of stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, they've put nothing in the record. That's closing arguments. They've put nothing in the record disputing that the gun came back. Zero. Not one witness said, in my belief, the gun couldn't have come back. Zero. Nothing contradicts that. Just their creative fantasy arguments. Now, let's look at that. Geez, the holster, okay? Two people said, Rosser said, I used that holster. It doesn't come out. Could come out, might not come out. Hugh says yes. It doesn't matter, ladies and gentlemen, because of physical evidence. There is no blood on the holster. There is nothing there. And think about the clothing that was worn. Okay? There's blood on the gun. Think about the clothing that was worn. Underwear, shorts, pants, okay? A t-shirt, sweatshirt. You see the picture of the sweatshirt and think, the sweatshirt's down here. If the gun was in the holster, it never comes out underneath the sweatshirt, ladies and gentlemen. But again, it's not about that. That's after. It's about whether or not, and my client did see the gun turn back towards him. That's a distraction, ladies and gentlemen. How do we get here, ladies and gentlemen? How do we get in this situation? Because the government starts with a premise and works backwards. What do I mean by that? Ms. Stevens told you in her opening that they started from a premise and worked backwards. 6 shots in the back and silence. And Casey Goodson's not a threat. That's what they told that they were going to prove to you, okay? 6 shots in the back, silence, and Casey Goodson wasn't a threat. What happens when you start from a premise and you work backwards, ladies and gentlemen, is you hire an expert after the fact who doesn't know Ohio law, who doesn't tell you definitions, all right? And you indict someone for 3 competing theories, all right? And then what happens in your case is your own witnesses, ladies and gentlemen, contradict your theory of the case. Your own witnesses contradict your theory of the case. So that's their theory, right? He's not a threat, silence, 6 shots, 6 shots, 6 shots, 6 shots. All right, well, who's the first group that contradicts him? Officer Rippey, Detective Williams, and Detective Kroom. They all tell you if you see someone waving a gun, you have a lawful authority to pursue. You must pursue. You must investigate. They all tell you that if you see someone with a gun eluding you, you have to go forward. You have to go forward. They all tell you that their actions as an officer are based on whatever the suspect's actions are. You have to react to the suspect's actions, okay? All 3 of them say that. All 3 of them say, can someone be a threat if their back is facing you and they have a gun? Yes. They're not a deadly threat yet, but yes. And they all told you after Mr. Merkel asked questions, if the gun came back, they even interrupted, I would shoot. They all told you that based on their training, if the gun came back, they would shoot. That goes against theirs. The second person, ladies and gentlemen, you heard them tell about how fast someone can turn. They all said, if someone has a gun and their back is towards you, are they still a threat? Yes, because of the quickness, because of the sudden turns. That's their witnesses. The next one, ladies and gentlemen, is the coroner, okay, Dr. Shepler. Now, again, the audacity to say to even give you an idea of which shots are the first goes against 100% of what she testified to. It's impossible, and she's a forensic pathologist. If anyone would know, she would, and it's impossible. Now, it's not that complicated, ladies and gentlemen. You don't need a big demonstration. I asked the doctor, if you're facing this way, and she pointed out the wounds, 1, 2, 2 up here, 2 over here. Those entrance wounds were all what? Back to front, right to left, and upward, correct? So if the body's positioned, doctor, the entrance wounds are consistent with the bullets coming this way. She said, yes. Doctor, you don't know the position at the time, do you? She has no idea, access to discover anything like that. No. You have no idea how the body was positioned. Correct. Doctor, if the body was turned this way, and the same wounds, the same entrance wounds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the same entrance wounds, ladies and gentlemen, was this way, would that be consistent from the bullets coming this way? Yes, it would be consistent. It's that simple, ladies and gentlemen. And think about it. She doesn't have Jason Meade's statement. She doesn't have anything like that. She has not. It's that simple. Their own witness contradicts their theory of the case. Right to left, back to front, upward. Using your common sense, that kind of matches with what Jason Meade says in his statement, but somehow there's a cover-up. Now the cover-up involves Dr. Shepler and my client on the positioning of the body. My client told you when he was facing away, could you see the gun? No. Did my client shoot then? No, because he couldn't see the gun. But when the body turned, and my client never said he turned and faced him. My client said he turned. The gun came towards me. Using your common sense, ladies and gentlemen. And don't get distracted by impossibilities. Their own expert, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Stoughton. They're his words, ladies and gentlemen. They're his words. And his words, ladies and gentlemen, are, if Mr. Goodson did turn and point a firearm, Deputy Meade's decision to shoot was appropriate, reasonable, and consistent with generally accepted police practices. They're his words. He agrees in his report. Now, what does he tell you? But he has to testify for however long, let's see, $3.85 an hour. He's got between 40 and 50 hours, so I did 45. Then he's got 8 hours last week plus travel, so I did 8, 9. Then he's got 8 hours yesterday and travel, that and that. So that's about 70 hours. And you times that by 385, and it's $26,950 to tell you that. He's not an expert in Ohio, never trained anybody in Ohio, doesn't have any police training in Ohio. Compare that with Kevin Davis, 33 years as a police officer in Ohio, OPATA certified, trainer of the year. Thousands of people he's trained on use of force and deadly use of force. Kevin Davis definitely knows the definition of deadly force in Ohio. This guy comes from another state and says, sorry, I'm in Ohio, can't do it. I don't know the Ohio definition. You don't take the time to respond to my partner. You don't take the time to look up the definition of deadly force in Ohio. That's their expert, not me. No, that's not what I can't do that. I can't do that. He was retained after the indictment, ladies and gentlemen. And he gives you no evidence contrary. They were waiting for it. Oh, I have this, I have something from the corner, I have this picture. He goes, so there's a factual dispute. His big factual dispute is Jason Meade didn't stop. Jason Meade said Casey Goodson stopped at the intersection to let the car go by, and he didn't stop. Whoa! That means the gun didn't come back. Jason Meade. No evidence contrary. That's what happens when you start from a premise and you work backwards. What also happens, ladies and gentlemen, is you stand up in closing like Mr. Schroyer did, and you talk about locking the car. You talk about, Casey Goodson got out of the car and locked the car. That's why they asked the questions about, hey, the car can't lock remotely to the family members. The keys did that. What shred or scintilla of evidence that they put forth saying that Casey Goodson locked the car when he got out? None. That's how they do it. That's how they roll. They put zero up there. What happens when you start with a premise and you work backwards? You have three competing theories: reckless, knowingly, purposefully. I'm not sure, ladies and gentlemen, how you can have a reckless thought and a purposeful thought, intent, because they have to prove the intent. Those are the three elements of in play here, ladies and gentlemen. The three elements. Let's look at recklessness. Was Jason Meade reckless at the scene, at the intersection? No. Did he fire his weapon there? No. Did Jason Meade fire his weapon when he saw Casey Goodson at the end of the street? No. That would be reckless. Did Jason Meade fire when Casey Goodson was going away from him and he was pursuing him? No. That would be reckless. They have proven beyond a reasonable doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that there's three holes in the door. They have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the floor plan of the panes. They have proven, but what they've also proven, ladies and gentlemen, is that this is a sad case. It's a tragedy. Goes without saying, right? We talked about this in voir dire. It's going to affect you. Absolutely. And what did they do? They, ladies and gentlemen, they first start, and you're told in the jury instructions, ladies and gentlemen, that you can't use sympathy. Okay, good luck. That's what you're tasked. You're tasked to be a clinician back there. Who was a clinician? The coroner. She was almost giddy going through the past and the bulls and stuff, but what did they do? First, they start with a picture of the front and back, entrance wounds and exit wounds. And then what do? They go over all 6 entrance wounds and all 3 exit wounds, and the fragments and everything like that. Okay. People start to get emotional. Okay. Then what do? They do the side view. 6 entrance, 3 exits. And they do the exact same thing over again and over again. People start crying in the courtroom, of course. It affects you, of course. Then what do? They take it to another level and they put the pictures, the more people start getting more upset. And you actually see the big hole and the grays and all that. And they have the coroner go through every single path that the bullet, every vital organ that it hit. Ladies and gentlemen, they do that, but no one's contesting the cause of death here. No one's contesting the manner of death. You heard us. We stood up and stipulated. The person at the scene is the same person who did the autopsy of it. It's the same person that died as a result of gunshots. No one's contesting it. But that's all they have, ladies and gentlemen. That's all they have. And they keep doing it, and then they do it again today. Their own trajectory expert contradicts their case and theory. Their theory, ladies and gentlemen. Miss Creela, she can't tell you the position of the body. She can't tell you the position of the door. She can tell you it wasn't at 0, and she can tell you it wasn't all the way to open or so. And that's all she can tell you. And this is the type of evidence that they put forth that you're supposed to rely upon. The most important of your own. They tell you we settled on 45. We did an arbitrary thing of 45 degrees with the screen door. She has no idea. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way, it could be all the way up to 89. Yes. So what does the government do? They have this picture that they give to Professor Stoughton, who now somehow is a trajectory expert. May I have the Elmo, please? So this picture, right? This picture, ladies and gentlemen, is done with a door at 45-degree angle, arbitrarily put. And look at the trajectory here when you go backwards. That would mean that it was here, okay? Here along these lines. Well, this is the fence. So that means the shell casings would now be over here to the right. That means Jason Meade must have been inside the fence area when he shot. And you know that's not true from Rosser. You know that's not true. So ladies and gentlemen, I don't know why they give it to Professor Stoughton, but that, even at 45 degrees, it can't happen that way. And that's their proof, ladies and gentlemen. This is what happens, ladies and gentlemen, when you start from a premise and you work backwards. Jason Meade told you that he thought he was complying when he shrugged his shoulders down, and Jason stopped going forward. He thought he was complying, and then he turned. He can't tell you which foot was up, which position, couldn't see this, couldn't see it, didn't see the keys, didn't see, no. He could only tell you that he couldn't see his hands when his back was to him, but when he came back, 3 holes in the door. Focus on that door. That's the case. Caleb Worley. What did he testify to? The gun guy, likes his job, good at it. Caleb Worley, right? Caleb Worley, what is that? What do they do? They have him parade that scary weapon, that big weapon. How much bigger it is than the handgun? That's the rifle that he's issued on SWAT team. Their expert was issued the same thing when he was for the Tallahassee Police Department. But what do? They parade it in front of you. Slowly. Click, click, click. That's what they do to you. For 55 minutes, he testifies about that type of stuff. Because it's got a sight. Because it does this, it does that. It's the issued rifle. What did he really testify to, ladies and gentlemen? This is where it really gets difficult for the government. This is what he really testified to, ladies and gentlemen, is that the 6 shell casings found at the scene all came from the rifle. Whoa! Alert, alert. We acknowledge that. That any of the projectiles that were found at the scene or fragments most likely did come from the weapon. Yes. No one's saying it didn't. But they put him up there for the effect of that. Whew. He had such an advantage with that rifle. But what did he really say, ladies and gentlemen? Ms. Stevens cross-examined him. What did he really say? He said, safety. You're trained. You never point a gun at something unless you intend to shoot. And that's how law enforcement officers are trained to respond. You never point at something unless you're going to shoot. And again, it's a distraction. It doesn't matter, ladies and gentlemen, to Mr. Worley, if it's a toy gun, if the gun is unloaded, if the gun doesn't work, or if the safety's on. You would not be able to tell that at 10 to 15 feet apart because that wasn't anything known to Jason Meade at the time, but they've got to throw that out there for you. They've got to try to deceive you on that. Caleb Worley said, Ms. Stevens, I wouldn't be able to see that in any bit. It doesn't matter. That's why you have instructions in there about mistaken, about those types of things. An officer can be mistaken, whether it's a toy gun, fake gun, no gun even. A possession of the gun is irrelevant. You never point a gun at something unless you intend to shoot it. They have a dog and pony show, ladies and gentlemen. They rap with sympathy, they rap with a scary gun, and they want you to fall for that, ladies and gentlemen. But they don't even take the extra steps, ladies and gentlemen. What do they not do? What do they not do in their investigations? No one in their investigation, Ms. Creela said, yeah, I would have really liked a rifle. I would have tested myself to do the ejection pattern. Send the rifle? No. Do they send to Detective Howe the AirPods to see if they're even working, to see if they're paired one off, one on? They don't send anything. Do they ask Korn, them, or the FBI about social medias? Absolutely not, because they don't want to know. Do they go and find the picture that's missing from there with the trajectory? No, because they don't want to do those things. You don't distract unless you have something to hide. That's what they do, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about the whole case and the truth of the case. This case is about the whole picture. Who gave you the whole picture? Who shined a light on the entire case? We did. Our case in chief. You would have never heard from Sheila Staniford had we not called her. You would never have heard that she corroborated our client by saying, I heard the commands 3 times, then I heard the shots. They kept her from you. They knew what she said. They had the tape recording, but it doesn't fit their theory. We called her. We shined a light on the whole picture. If we didn't call Ryan Rosser, ladies and gentlemen, you wouldn't have corroboration about many things. First of all, that he stopped and told me a guy's got a gun. Do you think Ryan Rosser believed Jason Meade when Jason Meade said guy's got a gun? Absolutely. That's why he did the U-turn. We gotta go, guy's got a gun. Again, what does Ryan Rosser tell you? At first I thought maybe it was Barber, he came back or something like that. But then when we got up there, and went past the Barber residence, I realized it wasn't Barber. What does he corroborate next, ladies and gentlemen? That he pointed him out and then the person fled. Ryan Rosser corroborates that. We called Ryan Rosser. As he pulls up, what does Ryan Rosser hear? Show me your hands, show me your hands. We called Ryan Rosser. We shed the light. You would never have heard from them if we didn't call them. There's no recordings of it. There's no body-worn camera. No, the U.S. Marshals doesn't allow it. How do we corroborate that if we don't call David Youngless, you will never hear that Jason aired what he aired at the time he saw it. Their theory, ladies and gentlemen, is so outlandish. They think someone with Jason Meade's training, someone who's honorable discharge from the Marines, you don't get honorable discharge from the Marines if you delete stuff. You don't get it. You don't get honorable discharge if you lie. But he airs it and says it, but their theory is he didn't see it. It's a cover-up. You don't hear the actual question Officer Phillips asked Jason unless we play the whole clip. You don't hear it. The question was, what was the call? How did I miss the call? Not, why did you fire your weapon? Ladies and gentlemen, a reasonable doubt is doubt based on reason and common sense. In this case, the state's own evidence, ladies and gentlemen, and the conclusions they ask you to make insult your common sense. It's insulting. Our case is real simple, real straightforward. Two things we have to prove. Number one, more likely than not, a smidge over 50%. Number one, more likely than not, was Jason Meade placed in a situation in which he had believed there was an immediate threat when the gun came back, and he had to use lethal force. Number one, did he perceive that? Did he believe that? We've proven to you that more likely than not. Number two, we have to show that from the interactions, from the time he saw that gun to use deadly force is reasonable based on the totality of circumstances that he observed. And then you put a reasonable police officer in his shoes. And is that something that a reasonable police officer could believe as well to use deadly force? That's what we have to prove, more likely than not. You can find that they didn't meet their burden, and your analysis stops. You can find they don't meet their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, your analysis stops. If you find that they did meet their burden, then you have to go to ours, more likely than not. If you find that we met ours, and you find that they met theirs, it must be not guilty. Our burden, even though it's lower, trumps theirs. That's just the law, ladies and gentlemen. You might be sad about it, you might not agree with it, that's the way the law works. Because officers are afforded that type of deference because of the danger of their jobs. So, we have to refer you in the jury instructions when you go back there to the calculus of reasonableness. The calculus of reasonableness. Here's what's in the jury instructions. The Graham factors. We talked about them on voir dire. Mr. Davis talked about them. Stoughton talked about them. But the Graham factors. Number one, severity of crime at issue. Waving a gun, pointing a gun, running away through a neighborhood, everyone testified is a severe crime. Is it more likely than not the severity of the crime? Yes, we've proven that factor more likely than not. All law enforcement officers said that that's a dangerous situation. We don't have to prove that that's a deadly threat right then, ladies and gentlemen, but we have to prove more likely than not that the waving of a gun and fleeing with a gun is dangerous. Number two, whether the suspect posed an immediate threat, okay? And there is no higher threat, ladies and gentlemen, than when an officer's staring down the barrel of a gun. There is no higher threat. And there is nothing more that's immediate or imminent than that, ladies and gentlemen. And we have proven that more likely than not. Another Graham factor you'll see in there was the suspect attempting to evade. More likely than not, based on what Ryan Rosser said and based on what Jason Meade said, was it more likely than not that he was attempting to evade? Yes. They both testified that Jason had stuff on. There's the guy. He turned and looked at us, and he fled. That's what they observed. That's what they perceived. And a reasonable officer in those shoes would perceive that as evading as well, ladies and gentlemen. The next one, you're to consider situations with furtive gestures or sudden turns. Do we have that here? Yes. There's a sudden turn with the gun. That's when he sees the gun. Your next Graham factor you're to consider is, did he ignore commands? Yes. You heard Sheila Staniford say that she heard the commands. You heard Jason Meade say he told them. And you heard Ryan Rosser say you hear him. You're not going to see in there, why did he ignore the commands? That's not the analysis. And I know that that's hard because this is such a devastating case. But that's not the analysis. Based on the observations, did the person not listen to commands? More likely than not, yes. Commands were given, he never stopped. Commands were yelled by someone in the Marines, by someone in 18 years of law enforcement. They weren't talked. The next factor that you'll read in the jury instructions is, was the suspect possibly armed? Again, more likely than not, 100%. Whether this occurred during a chase? Yes, more likely than not. The next one is the duration of the confrontation. The duration of the confrontation is important because of how fast things change. They go from up in the intersection to this. Once he ran with the gun to an unknown place, an unknown address, no matter what someone says, police are trained to expect the unexpected. Police have to believe that there's nefarious intent going on. Police have to believe that. That's how they're trained, because it's not normal for someone to be waving and pointing a gun in an intersection, to them be eluding police. That's not normal activity. You don't just go, hey, I'm here to talk to the guy about, no. But that's the distraction they want you to have. What's not in there is tactics, ladies and gentlemen. What's not in there is generally accepted practices. This case is about what happened from the time of that incident to the shooting in the doorway. And my client told you, I didn't shoot when he was running. I didn't shoot. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't. He was placed in every officer's nightmare situation. And he had to respond. We started off closing, ladies and gentlemen, talking about the tragedies in the two families. Those tragedies will never go away. No verdict that you give back in this case will ever take those tragedies away. There is no verdict, ladies and gentlemen, that will bring Casey Goodson back. There's not. There is no burden that will heal both sides of this courtroom, ladies and gentlemen. There is no verdict. There's no power to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, you do have the power, though. You do have the power to prevent a third tragedy. And a third tragedy would be to rely upon evidence that they put forth, either in their direct or their case and rebuttal, ladies and gentlemen, or their cross-examination. That would be the tragedy, ladies and gentlemen, if you allowed that, because we have proven our case more likely than not, that our client was faced with an imminent, immediate threat, and that he had to use lethal force. And we have proven that more likely than that, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you good luck in your deliberations and Godspeed, and I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Councilwoman approach. you guys holding up?
Good.
You want to keep going forward, or you want to break?
Keep going.
All right.
Hey.
Does anyone need a bathroom break or anything? Okay, let's take a 15-minute break. Oh, hold on. Do not discuss this case among yourselves. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. It is your Councilman approach. No, you won't. Joe, you can go back and get the pizza.
All rise.
Everyone can have a seat. Any rebuttal closing on behalf of the state of Ohio?
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, to me, it's amazing how quickly the burden shifts. You'll have the instructions. You understand that as when Mr. Merkel was up here, we had the initial burden to show the elements of the offenses that are charged, 1, 2, or all 3 of them. Then, if you agree with those, which I don't think anybody disagrees, that Jason Meade was the one that did the shooting, the defendant, that he shot Casey Goodson. Casey Goodson died as a result of these injuries. So the shifts to them. Mr. Collins gets up here, it's like, well, the state didn't do this, the state didn't do that, the state didn't call this witness. Well, guess what? We don't have to. It's their burden. If they want to call, they call. Because they're the ones that have to prove it to you, not us. It's their burden of preponderance of the evidence. Now, the standard is what a reasonable officer placed in the shoes of the defendant does not mean that you believe the defendant's subjective belief, or that you have to take it, or that it's true, or that it's even reasonable. You got the instruction on credibility. So you're the ones that are going to decide whether it was reasonable, whether it was true. Also, Mr. Collins brings up, it's not 20/20 hindsight. You mentioned 20/20 hindsight. It is not 20/20 hindsight to evaluate his actions from an objectively reasonable officer's standard. Because what you're doing is you're going to evaluate his tactics. You're going to evaluate his decisions. You're going to evaluate his actions, because all these go towards his mental state, his demeanor, and his credibility. Throws everything to the wind, doesn't follow his training, police practice as to what he's supposed to do, and tosses it off to the side. You're going to make that decision as to how that affects his credibility, tactics. Now, the evidence which has shown that the defendant was overly aggressive throughout all objectively reasonable policing tactics. He can't be believed due to his rapidly evolving story and his excuses covering up his unjustified shooting of Casey. And he spoke to some of that. I want you to think back to the very first question I asked him. He did acknowledge the importance that reports are accurate, reliable, and complete. After all, he's a law enforcement officer. That's part of being a law enforcement officer, is to be accurate, reliable, and complete. He knew when he made his 10-page statement, weeks following the shooting, that it needed to be, and he admitted, accurate, reliable, and complete. Now, so what's happened? Mr. Collins brings up the intersection in his statement at the intersection. And he's trying to say that, well, he was all three of those things, but he wasn't. And I'm going to explain to you why this is important at the intersection. He's right. Didn't know about the video. This is when he makes his 10-page statement. He was very specific and expressed details, trying to express that how he was able to see Casey Goodson's vehicle, how he was able to see what he's going to put in this report after the shooting, what he's going to put in this report to make him more credible. So what's he say? What's he say? I'm stopped at the intersection. Okay. He was. He just pulled up. This video verifies that. I was 10 feet away when Casey Goodson's car stopped in the middle of the intersection. Why would he do that? Oh, I can see, observe what I'm going to tell him the rest of the story. I've got the best view. What's next? Well, he stops. And the reason he stopped was because why? Oh, there's a northbound car coming. That's why he stopped, sitting there while I'm looking straight ahead, 10 feet away, looking at him, waiting for the northbound car to come. So what's he put in his statement then? I could see him then pointing the gun at the northbound car, watching it go through the intersection. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these are material specific things from a law enforcement officer made a few weeks after, who's trained to observe. So what's the next thing he says? He's trying to create a scenario where Casey was threatening another vehicle. Now, mind you, he's the only one that sees this. Mind you, at least in his mind, he's the only, nobody else, he can make this up because nobody else was there. Then he goes on to say, that Casey had a black gun with an extended clip. Well, Mr. Collins goes, see how credible he is? He put it in his statement 10 days later. He was at the scene, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. He saw the gun there. He wrote this statement 2-3 weeks later. Of course he saw a gun with an extended clip. And by the way, when you get it back there, extended clip's only about that big. It's not talking about some clip like this. It's about that big. Then he states, after the other car clears the intersection, Casey then turns and past him. So he points the gun at him. So now he's got two threats. Remember, now this is weeks afterwards. This is weeks after the fact. He's making Casey out to be in some type of threat out there, threat to others. So what's he do now? Now he remembers when he's on the witness stand, oh, it was a mistake. Oh, that's right, because he can't stick to the same story because now he's got the video. Casey wasn't stopped. You know what? Mr. Collins made a big deal like going, I didn't know that there was a car that went through the intersection. Of course we did. But the problem is, it's not what he said in the statement. He takes the witness stand and says, oh, now wait a second. That was after the car had already gone through the intersection. You'll have the video and look at it. It was after it was through the intersection. Nobody stopped. It says they're going through, and I could still see everything. I could still see everything. I'll leave it up to you whether or not you believe that. So what else do we have? Chris Korn, okay. He didn't see a gun, and by the way, Rosser didn't see a gun when he made the turn. Chris Korn said he saw yelling, moving. We do know Casey had AirPods in his ears, so it sounds like to me that seems quite reasonable and believable. Saw Casey singing and dancing. But I find it kind of interesting that he spent, I don't know how long on Chris Korn. You can't believe him. But you should believe Jason Meade when he said, oh, I'm mistaken, that the car didn't stop. Oh, believe him. Believe him. But man, Chris Korn, can't believe him, even though we've got video of Chris Korn in his van, pulling up to the intersection, stopping, in position to see. So Mr. Korn's mismemory should disqualify him in your minds, according to the defense, but believe him. Now, what's interesting about this whole scenario is there was no testimony that the defendant told anyone that he aired, that Casey pointed a gun. Instead, what he said was, and I think Mr. Collins admitted that, he said he waved a gun. Never mentioned. Oh, in his statement, pointing a gun. There were 4 people with that car on the States intersection. Only one saw the gun. Yeah. So what's he decide to do? Well, this big violation that they're saying took place, this dangerous situation that they're trying to make out, he says he's going to go conduct a field interview. After he claims that he's witnessed this event, and he's going to do a field interview. So you have to ask yourself, did it really happen? I mean, yeah, he's going to, about pointing the gun at the intersection, did this really happen? Did he see somebody waving something, or did he see something, or did he see? We know Casey had the gun in the car. He had it on him. But has he embellished the story? I'd suggest to you that he has, after the fact, after he knew what he did at the home at 3996 Estate Street, State's Place. There's not a single witness to corroborate the defendant's assertion that Casey pointed a gun at him at the intersection, nor at the house. Neither place. It's just his word. So let's talk about at sales and estates. That's the intersection there. And you have to ask yourself, what was the defendant's attitude, demeanor, credibility? Was he acting as an objectively reasonable officer would at that time? Well, he did abandon his reasonableness, and he did resort to, as he characterizes it, hunting tactics to get his man at any cost. You heard what Professor Stout indicated, that he was outside the spectrum of generally accepted policing principles. The defendant never told Rosser or Yorkowitz about pointing a gun or even waving a gun at that time. Now, does that make any sense? That, and I think I asked him in cross-examination. Well, wait a second. You didn't tell them? Another excuse. I thought they knew. Oh, really? Did they say they knew, or did they say? Why would I tell them again, was his answer. Well, you'd tell them again so that you'd radioed for backup. You'd radioed for people to come and help you, and they're there, and you don't advise them what the next step is. You don't have a plan. You don't coordinate. Well, why would I do that? His answer was, because it would be redundant. And he stated, I assumed, I presumed. Wouldn't he want to know if they saw anything when the car went by there, when Casey drove by their truck? Wouldn't he even inquire about that? Hey, did you guys see anything? Tell me more. What do you guys know? What did you see? Did you see the same thing I saw? No inquiry. No inquiry. So you ask yourself, what's going on here? What's going on in that man's mind at this point? Field interview, but he's on a pursuit. I don't know which one it was. He said field interview, which we discussed what a field interview is. You stop, and you know what? It could turn out what he said on the witness stand. It could turn out to be nothing. Well, wait a second. If it could turn out to be nothing, then did you see what you saw at the intersection? Because you're telling everybody this wasn't nothing. It was something. But he says, well, I could have done the field interview. That's what my intentions were, and it could have turned out to be nothing. Doesn't make sense. Let's use some common sense in this courtroom. That's what I asked you to do. And you know what? The other thing he was is that, wow, after all, he says, and it's an unforgettable event of having a gun pointed at you. Well, you know what? It must not be that unforgettable. He forgot to tell Rosser and Yorkowitz. But that's what he said here. It's an unforgettable event. He claims urgency, man with a gun. Yet he would not coordinate for backup, which he claims. He just leaves them behind. Now, remember the 20/20 hindsight. Mr. Collins sits there and says, oh, that's all these guys talk about. It's 20/20. No, it's not 20/20 hindsight we're asking you to look at. You have to evaluate his actions to determine what he was thinking, doing, and his intentions, what he was going to do. Whether or not he was acting as an objectively reasonable officer. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I think even if you're looking at this and you hear what Professor Stoughton says, it's like, wait a second, this isn't how officers operate. These can create dangerous situations. He abandoned it all. What's he thinking? Why would he abandon it? After all, remember the one time when I said to him, why wouldn't you let him go into the house? I'm a police officer. That's what he said. Well, he abandoned it for a field interview. No lights, and and what kind of exchange was that? Mr. Meade, you could have turned your lights on. Oh, lights? Well, you wanted to identify yourself to Casey at the end of the street. Well, I had my vest on. Well, you're about, first he said 2 houses away, and then I think the next day I showed him a map. He's 6 houses away, okay? I guess he didn't remember how far away he was, or he's trying to convince you guys that he was much, much closer than what he really was. I had my vest on. What? You have lights? Turn the lights on. I couldn't take time to do that. Really? Well, how about your siren? Why, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. What's he thinking? This is an objective, reasonable officer here? To do a field interview? How about a PA? I don't think I have a PA system. I might. Okay, well, let's see here. So, all right, you don't have time to flick on your lights to show that you're an officer. At the end of the, so Casey gets out, he can see you. Okay, well, don't have time. What, did you ask Rosser and Yorkowitz? I mean, they're your backup. They're there. Oh, I didn't ask them. Did you tell your Rosser and Yorkowitz anything that you'd seen at the intersection? I thought they already knew. It's redundant. Redundant. It's not redundant, and it's not proper policing practices, regardless of what Davis wants to tell you. Davis has never testified but for a police officer. Davis is a police officer. That's his entire thing that he does. To come in here and to testify for officers. Ask yourself, you want to believe that? That, well, Mr. Davis, could he flip on his lights? Could he do this? Oh, his tactics were good. I think all of us using common sense can say, it wasn't. It wasn't. So who do you believe? Professor Stoughton or Davis? You know, the other thing about Davis is, Davis, he's the expert. All Davis did was take his written statement and adopt it as being true. That's all he did. Did he question anything else that was in controversy to his statement? No, I ignore that. Was his purpose to come in here to tell you that he believes him? Yeah, that's what they did. That's what they did. They brought him in here so they could put him on that stand just to tell you guys, I believe him. That's the only purpose behind it. Oh, so Mr. Davis. So, other officers were there, no communication. Other officers were not prepared to assist. Oh my word. You heard Rosser. My gosh, he took off. He admits, he opens up, looks down at the end of the street, and he says, hey, there's the guy with the gun. That's his statement. Rosser, Yorkowitz have no idea what's going on. Absolutely not. They didn't even have their thigh rig. They didn't even have their guns. They didn't have anything. So now, if this threat was as dangerous, now all of a sudden he says, now it's turned into a threat. Well, you heard Professor Stout. There's a difference between risk and threats and when you can use deadly force and not use deadly force. Now all of a sudden he's escalated into, well, now it might be an investigation. Maybe not a field interview, maybe an investigation, maybe an arrest. I don't know. But man, he screamed down that road as fast as he could to get to the end. Rosser, Yorkowitz have no idea what's going on. They were not prepared. There was no communication. Over what? Well, I said to him, why? I got to stop him. What he's going to do. Well, what's he going to do? Got out of his car. Did Casey look at you? Well, I didn't see his face, but yeah, he looked my direction when I yelled. Okay. Did he point a gun at you? No. Well, he can't say yes because there's two witnesses there. I put money on it, though. If they weren't there, he probably told you he pointed a gun at him at that time, too. It's only when nobody can dispute what he says is when he comes up with that type of stuff. stopped at the intersection. He didn't know we had the video. And then he comes in here and tries to tell you guys, oh, I'm going to change this. That's right, he didn't stop. He was driving through the intersection. And, oh, the other driver, I couldn't tell if he saw it or not, but so you're looking northbound? You'd be looking at the back of that northbound car. In a statement, he's sitting there where he can see the car coming. He's not being truthful. And if you can't be truthful about that, you got to start questioning yourself. What can I believe from this man? If you believe him on that, well, there's more. Then maybe you will want to question whether you end up believing him. So what happens at the intersection then? Professor Stout says an objective, reasonable officer would communicate, gather information, take precautions to protect themselves and others. Well, he must not have thought Casey was that big a threat because he left his backup behind without telling him about this extreme threat. If there truly was a threat, do you think he would really leave his backup behind that would be put in danger? It's because he knows. He might have seen something. He's after Casey. Okay, maybe when Casey got out, I don't know. Okay, we know Casey carried his gun in the front of his pants. We know from Sharon, which they say, by the way, we'll bring this up a little further down the road, he says she's very credible. We believe everything that Sharon told you. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Casey's got the gun in the front of his pants. We know he carries it like that. Sometimes when he gets in the car, he takes it out. He lays it out. We know that. We're the ones that brought that out to you. They didn't. Gets out of the car. He's got his subs. Maybe he gets out and maybe something was seen put in his. I don't know. I only believe him. Because Rosser didn't see anything. Too far away. Rosser didn't see anything that's threatening. So Professor Stoughton says at that intersection there, he was outside the spectrum of generally acceptable principles of policing practice. Now, they keep trying to say that Professor Stoughton was coming in here to testify as deadly force. He came in here to testify as generally accepted policing practices, and you heard his testimony. You heard his credentials. He's renowned in this area. That this is the generally accepted policing practices that are followed by most agencies in this country, including his. So, what's he say? Well, Mr. Collins makes a big deal out of it because he goes, he was truthful. He was truthful. Schroyer made a big deal out of it because he said he was running. Oh, really? Yeah, I did make a big deal about that. Because that's not what he said in that statement that he did after, I don't know, some type statement that he sat down. I don't know who helped him prepare it or whatever. But he said running. That's not what he said in the statement. He said quickly. There's a difference. And remember how he explained that? Well, and he kept saying running. Even after I called him on it and said, well, wait a second. You said quickly. Okay. And by the way, it's different than what Rosser saw. Rosser said he started seeing him walking. So he says running. Why does he want you to believe he's running? Oh, he's eluding me. He's fleeing from me. He's taking off. But you know what was kind of interesting? The same guy that's fleeing from you and taking you off used his turn signal to turn onto a state's place. So I'm pointing the gun at the officer at the intersection. I drive on down the road, okay, and I turn my turn signal on. You'll see it. I want you guys all to look for it. Turns his turn signal on and say, Come after me. I'm going to make a right-hand turn here. Come after me. I'm this guy that just pointed the gun. I'm going to tell you where I'm going. I'm using my turn signal. They didn't point that out to you. And by the way, I don't want to step into their territory of burden of proof, okay? I mean, I'm bringing this stuff up, but we don't have the burden of proof. They do. They do, and he knows it. And he stood up here trying to make you guys think we have that burden. They've got the burden. Trying to say that there's all this other stuff going on behind this case, that they didn't call witnesses, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. Well, you know what? They didn't call. I thought there was another expert going to testify. That's what it was told to you. Some guy named Jim Scanlon. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know why they didn't call him. But it's in their case that they want to try to show you their burden of proof. We don't call him. We proved our case. We sit down. Oh, Rosser, they didn't call Rosser. We didn't need to call Rosser. We proved our case. We sat down. And you know, I'm glad they did call Rosser. And the reason being is that when we get on down the street, it's kind of important as to Rosser's testimony. But let me get back to the running. Multiple times he uses the word running. We had that little exchange saying quickly. Well, you know, sometimes I use words quickly could mean running or whatever, and he continues to use the word running. Rosser said walking until he gets, and then may have sped up when he's going around the corner of the house. And if you remember the testimony was, it says, Mr. Merkel said, then he tries to say sprint, and Mr. Merkel goes, wait a second, sprint? Well, it was a half a step before he got around the corner. You know, it's kind of weird because the defendant had said he'd already gotten in his truck, sped off to go, and by the time before he left, he'd lost sight of Casey. Remember we got into this discussion about ducking behind something? I said, is that police lingo? Yeah, he ducked around the corner of the house. Well, geez, I don't know. I don't know who saw what, okay? But I do think he can take this. He wasn't running. Maybe he can run, walk, whatever, carrying his bag of subs. It's in the wintertime, okay? It's 12 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, okay? Doing whatever you do on a Friday afternoon, coming home from a dentist, going to Subway, taking subs to his family. This is really dangerous. Really dangerous on his part. So let's get to when he gets at the end of the street. So he gets to the end of the street, and I said, well, when you got out of your truck, okay, you could have sought cover. I think you all remember that. And he's like, cover? I don't have time for cover. Well, wait a second. There's a tree. I didn't see a tree. Mr. Collins gets up and says, there was nothing in between you and him. Well, there's a tree right there. You saw Mr. Merkel's exhibit. So there was a tree there. Now, did he seek it? No. Did he immediately pursue him? Yes. So what's he do? He closes the gap with his assault rifle. He clearly had a rifle that was a long range, maximum distance, not something you use close range. It's select mode, semi, fully automatic. He closed the gap within 10 feet. increases his risk and he escalates the threat. Not Davis, but Stoughton told you that. Terrible. Terrible. That's not the way a police officer acts. He was not acting as a police officer. He was acting for some other reason. Stoughton says, no time pressure, you know. Remember when I said to him, hey, you just could let him go in the house. No, I can't let him go in the house. I have to stop him from what he's going to do. Stoughton says, can't speculate. You can't assume. In fact, what he said was, I didn't even know it was his house. Now, if Casey was fleeing, why would he run into a gated area, run up to a house? Why didn't he take off? Why didn't he run around the neighborhood somewhere? You know, do you remember what he said? Sometimes people hide under cars, okay? I didn't see any hiding. He still had the bag of subs. He didn't even ditch the subs. I didn't know it was his house. I had no reason to believe it was his house. Why would the defendant do all this? Because he abandoned all of his training to go after Casey. What was his purpose? What had he conjured up in his mind? Was he angry, mad, or to get this man? We know his policing policies. His policing policies are, I strike first, and his policing policies are, I like to hunt people, I love it. What do we have going on here, ladies and gentlemen of the jury? A reasonable, objective officer? I would suggest that we don't. Something else was taking place, resulting in a horrible shooting of Casey. Because why? Casey doesn't comply. Why doesn't Casey comply? He's got earbuds in. Now, you can take this into consideration because it looks at what's Casey doing. Is Casey really not complying to what he's asking about? Or did Casey not hearing? Remember when I said, let him go, just let him go in the house. He retorted indignant, incredulous. I'm a police officer. I have to stop him. He could hurt people. I had no reason to believe he lived there. Those are his words. Now let's get to the shooting. It's unjustified shooting. Professor Stoughton, it's up to you to decide. He's the only one that was there. Had he waited a little longer, maybe he'd had his back up there. He's the only one there. Shoots before anybody gets there. So what's he said? Professor Stoughton says it's up to you guys. Davis goes, I'm making the decision for you, okay? I'm going to take it out of your purview. I'm going to tell you, yeah, this was good. Why? Because I read his statement. We don't even know if Davis ever even interviewed him. We don't even know if Davis ever even met him. He reads a typed statement and takes it and runs with it and comes in this courtroom and tells you. What kind of expert is that? I submit to you it's not an expert. It's a hired gun. So, let's look at what the defense presented to you. Okay? Okay, let me move up. Defendant claims he identified himself. He yelled multiple commands. Okay? Defense tries to bolster this by calling Sheila Staniford. She says two different stories. One, she's driving by the house when she hears the defendant, And the other story to the police, days afterwards, she said, she arrived home from the funeral at 11:30. She looked out her window, had concerns about a truck, which was a heating and cooling truck, and then she heard the commands. Okay, well, the problem is that was Mr. Korn's truck, and we have GPS to show Mr. Korn was in the area. So you got the Stanford? They're presenting this lady that tells you two completely different stories? To do what? To support that they, Stanford heard, drop the gun. But you know what's funny about this? Rosser didn't hear that. A trained police officer for years who works with this man. You know what Rosser, if you recall, what Rosser said was, the only thing I heard was two things, two times. Show me your hands, show me your hands. But they bring this woman in here to say she trumps Rosser. Who do you believe? Show me your hands, show me your hands. And he said, that's all I ever heard. I didn't hear anything else from this man. Show me your hands. And then I heard the shots. Not drop the gun. Defendant approached, aimed his rifle, center mass, center of his back. He couldn't see Casey's hands. Casey's back was turned toward him. Casey was doing something at the door. Could he be unlocking it? I don't know. Claims he opens the side door, storm door on his back. Could he be going in his home? I don't believe it's his home. Steps into the threshold. Casey, then he says, turns and raises his arm upwards and points the gun at me. Not as he's raising. That's not what he even showed you on the stand. He does some little movement like this. I don't know. You're going to have that storm. I don't know how you turn. What is he slamming into the storm door? What they conveniently leave out is there's a storm door there with glass and metal. He's got him inside on the threshold of the house. I just thought about this the other night. It was like, well, if somebody's calling over my left shoulder, I'd look this way. Because that's where Meade is. Meade's not over here. Why would he point the gun that way? Because they have to try to explain to you, mix things up, that how the shots got into the back. And by the way, the coroner said slight right to left. Cula's her diagram here, which was, I submit to you, wasn't shown. You'll have it. But look, this is the part that was cut off in that diagram they just showed you and closing. She has the shots coming out. Here's the gate. She's showing the directionality. Not that he's standing in here. Why would they show you this and try to perceive something that's not? Guess they didn't think I'd get up and show it to you. But Cula's testimony matches the coroner's. Outside to inside. Back, trajectionality. Slightly right to left. Upward. And it makes sense. He's at a lower elevation. You were out there. To get in the house, you have to take the step up. You're on a porch. He's at a lower elevation. Miss Merkel showed you the trajectories. He's absolutely right. Look at the one center mass. Where did he hit him? Military. He's fired these rifles. He points. He aims. He's got a red dot. He hits center mass because guess what? I'm trained to aim center mass. Not trained to enter his butt. Not trained to enter his side. I didn't miss him. Tried to tell you something on window. I tried to keep track of him as best as I could. He's a marksman. Then he says, Casey immediately drops, but yet the gun's not out. Oh. Bam, immediately drop. How did this gun get underneath him? Well, he has to say it's underneath him because guess what? Rosser was there. Rosser saw the gun here under his chest. The holster's in the front of his pants. We can't change this story. There's a witness. The only ones he can change is when there's no witness. It's under his pants, or he changes if there's a video. It's under his chest. So he has to, and then guess what he does? I rolled him over and it's under his right arm. Right arm? And then you see what Mr. Collins said? Well, wait, right arm, torso, kind of the same, whatever. Because he never said anything in his statement, right arm. Comes in here and tells you, right arm. Why? Because it wasn't. He didn't put in his statement, a law enforcement officer, right arm, that's important, Mr. Meade. Not the right arm? Oh, I said, I couldn't see his hands. Well, wait, I was yelling, show me your hands. That's not what Rosser said. Heard, show me your hands in shots. No other show me your hands. I'm asking you, what do you think's going on here?
Counsel want to approach?
I'm almost
1:15.
Okay. Rolled him over by his shoulder. Rosser says by his feet. Where were Casey's hands? By the way, Sharon's really believable. They believe her 100%. Sharon said his hands were out when she saw him laying on his stomach. Janae said his hands were out when he was laying on the stomach. I guess they're right. I believe Sharon.
Objection.
Overruled. Closing argument.
Okay. Actions by the defendant. When he rolled him over, I believe the AirPods clearly would be visible, yet he doesn't know whether he's dead or alive. No life-saving procedure. He panics. He begins to cover up. He runs out to turn on the lights to the truck to make it look like Casey could see him. He held up the ambulance. Don't come yet. Don't come yet. Truck giving the impression the lights were on. They submitted a photo to you guys saying, look, here's some lights. Here's some lights. Well, it turns out, why did they submit that photo to you? And in their opening statement, they said they were going to present evidence to you. He was coming down the street with his light. They never did that. What changed? Maybe they saw Rippy's body cam? I don't know. Defense counsel says lights were on. So what was the defendant thinking when he shot Casey 6 times? Well, this exchange took place on direct examination, and it certainly tells you his unreasonable, speculative, unhinged thinking. Mr. Collins, what type of harm can someone running through a neighborhood cause, Jason, based on your training and experience? Defendant. So the urgency of it again, being that I'm on a tactical team, we do barricade, hostage situations, things like that. If he gets into the home and takes hostages, he could go into the home, barricade himself. He could set up an ambush, police officers who've experienced all this. And then Collins goes, ask him the question, he goes, and he says he was a high threat. Then I asked him, why didn't you let him go in? His answer was, I had to get him to stop from doing what he's doing. Well, here's what he said on the porch. When we're playing this, he didn't know he's being recorded, and he's trying to say now, his excuse is, I was saying why there was a call. You tell me if you think there's a call. He admits his reason for shooting Casey. You listen. He came out on the street, gun in his hand, going to the side door, gun in his hand. Again, no threat, mention, no fear, only going in the house with a gun. Throughout this entire trial, his unreasonable pursuit and hunt, Casey never said a word to the defendant. Not one word. That's what was missing in this case. What did Casey say? It's pretty sad. Casey didn't speak one word because he never yelled anything. He never said anything. Why? Because he never heard him. He never heard him. Casey never said a word.
Your Honor, would object to ask the judge.
Yeah, can we approach? You get all that?
I'm sorry, talking so fast, I'm under a time limit. So here's what I've asked you when you go back there. Ask yourself, what was Casey's big plan? He's going to shoot an officer.
Sustained, sustained, move the strike.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, Casey did not point.
Stop, Your Honor.
Casey did not point his gun at the
Objection,
defendant.
Your Honor.
Sustained, move the strike.
The defendant has not met their burden of proof. This is not justification, ladies and gentlemen, jury. This is murder. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, your initial conduct, you can go back to your instructions on the top of page 14. Your initial conduct upon entering the jury room is important. It is not wise to express immediately a determination to insist upon a certain verdict, because if your sense of pride is aroused, you may hesitate to change your position, even if you later decide you are wrong. Consult with one another. Consider each other's views and deliberate with the objective of reaching an agreement if you can do so without disturbing your individual judgment. Each of you must decide the case for yourself, but you should do so only after discussions and considerations of the case with your fellow jurors. Do not hesitate to change an opinion if convinced that it is wrong. However, you should not surrender honest convictions in order to be congenial or to reach a verdict solely because of the opinion of other jurors. Before you can find the defendant guilty, you must unanimously agree on your verdict. On behalf of the public and parties, the court expresses appreciation for your services in performing this important public function. After your verdict is returned, you may discuss the case with anyone, but you are not required to do so. Whether you discuss the case with counsel or anyone else after you are discharged is a matter of your own free choice. When you retire to the jury room, you should select a foreperson. The foreperson will be responsible for exhibits and the verdict forms and return them to the courtroom. The foreperson will see that your discussions are orderly and that each juror has the opportunity to discuss the case and to cast his or her vote. Otherwise, the authority of the foreperson is the same as any other juror. Until your verdict is announced in open court, you are not to disclose to anyone else the status of your deliberations or the nature of your verdict. If you have questions, write them on a piece of paper and give the paper to the bailiff. If all the 12 of you agree on a verdict, all of you should sign the appropriate verdict form in ink. Advise the bailiff by turning on the green light, and you will then be returned to the courtroom. Alternate jurors were selected to serve in the event of any misfortune befalling a member of the panel. Each of you will remain as an alternate of this panel until your jury has reached a verdict. If your service is needed, you will be in panel with the other regular jurors and deliberations will start anew. You may return to it says to the general jury room to wait further instructions from the court. Since you are still an alternate juror, you are not to discuss this case with anyone, and you are not to tell anyone how you would vote on this case. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get you all the exhibits. One of the things, as I mentioned to you, if you want us to bring in the firearm, we will bring in each of the firearms. Is it a deputy that escorts it? So you can see and feel, but I'm not going to have a firearm and ammunition, live ammunition, back in the jury room. So if you need to see the ammunition, we'll bring that in and take the guns out and those kind of things. We'll get everything to you.
All rise.
It's the verdict form. If you guys need to stay, do you need to put anything on the record?
Yes, up at sidebar,